All right, here we go again. We're at the very bottom of page 14 now. And Brian's trying to get the microphone. So find that, bottom of page 14, last sentence. He had seen the pilot use it, had seen him depress the switch at his belt. So Brian pushed the switch in and blew into the mic. He heard the sound of his breathing in the headset. Hello? Is there anybody listening on this? Hello? He repeated it 2 or 3 times and then waited but heard nothing except his own breathing. Panic came then. He had been afraid, had been stopped with terror of what was happening. But now panic came and began to scream into the microphone, scream over and over, help, somebody help me. I'm in this plane and I don't know. He started crying with the screams, crying and slamming his hands against the wheel of the plane, causing it to jerk down, then back up. But again, he heard nothing but the sound of his own sobs in the microphone, his own screams mocking him, coming back into his ears. The microphone. Awareness cut into him. He had used a CB radio in his uncle's pickup truck once. You had to turn the mic switch off to hear anybody else. He reached to his belt and released the switch. For a second, all he heard was whoosh of the empty airwaves. Then, through the noise and the static, he heard a voice. Whoever is calling on this radio net, I repeat, release your mic switch. You are covering me. You are covering me. Over. It stopped. Brian hit his mic switch. I hear you. I hear you. This is me. He released the switch. Roger, I have you now. The voice was very faint and breaking up. Please state your difficulty and location. And say over to signal end of transmission. Over. Please state my difficulty, Brian thought. My difficulty? I'm in a plane with a pilot who has had a heart attack or something. He can't fly, and I don't know how to fly. Help me! Help! He turned his mic off without ending transmission properly. There was a moment's hesitation before the answer. Your signal is breaking up, and I lost most of it. Understand? Pilot, you can't fly. Correct? Over. Brian could hardly hear him now. Heard mostly noise and static. That's right, I can't fly. The plane's flying now, but I don't know how much longer. Over. Lost signal. Your location, please. Flight number, location, I don't know my flight number or location. I don't know anything. I told you that. Over. He waited now. Waited. But there was nothing. Once, for a second, he thought he heard a break in the noise. Some part of a word, but it could have been static. 2, 3 minutes, 10 minutes. The plane roared, and Brian listened, but heard no one. Then he hit the switch again. I do not know the flight number. My name is Brian Robeson. We left Hampton, New York, headed for the Canadian oil fields to visit my father, and I do not know how to fly an aeroplane, and the pilot... He let go of the mic. His voice was starting to rattle, and he felt as if he might start screaming at any second. He took a deep breath. If there is anybody listening who can help me fly a plane, please answer. Again he released the mic, but heard nothing but the hissing of the noise of the headset. After half an hour of listening and repeating the cry for help, he tore the headset off in frustration and threw it to the floor. It all seemed so hopeless. Even if he did get somebody, what could anybody do? Tell him to be careful? All so hopeless. He tried to figure out the dials again. He thought he might know which was speed. It was a lighted number that read 160. But he didn't know if that was actual miles an hour or kilometres, or if it just meant how fast the plane was moving through the air and not over the ground. He knew airspeed was different to ground speed, but not by how much. Parts of the books he'd read about flying came to him. How wings worked, how the propeller pulled the plane through the sky. Simple things that wouldn't help him. Nothing could help him now. An hour passed. He picked up the headset and tried again. It was, he knew, in the end, all he had, but there was no answer. He felt like a prisoner kept in a small cell that was hurtling through the sky at what he thought to be about 160 miles an hour. Headed he didn't know where, just headed somewhere until... There it was. Until what? Until he ran out of fuel. When the plane ran out of fuel, it would go down. Or he could pull the throttle out and make it go down. He had seen the pilot push the throttle in to increase speed. If he pulled the throttle back out, the engine would slow down and the plane would go down. Those were his choices. He could wait for the plane to run out of fuel, or he could push the throttle in and make it happen sooner. If he waited for the plane to run out of fuel, he would go further, but he did not know which way he was moving. When the pilot had jerked, he had moved the plane, but Brian could not remember how much or if it had come back to its original course. Since he did not know the original course anyway, and could only guess at which display might be the compass, the one reading 342, he did not know where he had been or where he was going, so it didn't make much difference if he went down now or waited. Everything in him rebelled against stopping the engine and falling now. He had a vague feeling that he was wrong to keep heading as the plane was heading, a feeling that he might be going off in the wrong direction, but he could not bring himself to stop the engine and fall. Now he was safe, or safer than if he went down. The plane was flying. He was still breathing. When the engine stopped, he would go down. So he left the plane running, holding altitude, and kept trying the radio. He worked out a system. Every 10 minutes by the small clock built into the dashboard, he tried the radio with a simple message. "I need help. Is there anybody listening to me?" In the times between transmissions, he tried to prepare himself for what he knew was coming. When he ran out of fuel, the plane would start down. He guessed that without the propeller pulling, he would have to push the nose down to keep the plane flying. He thought he may have read that somewhere, or it just came to him. Either way, it made sense. He would just have to push the nose down. Then just before he hit, he would have to pull the nose back up to slow the plane as much as possible. It all made sense. Glide down, then slow the plane, and hit. Hit. He would have to find a clearing as he went down. The problem with that was he hadn't seen one clearing since they'd started flying over the forest. Some swamps, but they had trees scattered through them. No roads, no trails, no clearings, just the lakes. And it came to him that he would have to use a lake for landing. If he went down in the trees, he was certain to die. The trees would tear the plane to pieces as it went into them. He would have to come down in a lake. No, on the edge of a lake. He would have to come down near the edge of a lake and try to slow the plane as much as possible just before it hit the water. Easy to say, he thought, hard to do. Easy say, hard do. Easy say, hard do. It became a chant that beat with the engine. Easy say, hard do. Impossible to do. He repeated the radio call 17 times at the 10-minute intervals, working on what he would do between transmissions. Once more he reached over to the pilot and touched him on the face. But the skin was cold, hard cold, death cold. And Brian turned back to the dashboard. He did what he could, tightened his seatbelt, positioned himself, rehearsed mentally again and again what his procedure should be. When the plane ran out of fuel, he should hold the nose down and head for the nearest lake and try to fly the plane kind of onto the water. That's how he thought of it. Kind of fly the plane onto the water. And just before it hit, he should pull on the wheel and slow the plane down to reduce the impact. Over and over in his mind ran the picture of how it would go. The plane running out of fuel, flying the plane onto the water, the crash, from pictures he'd seen on television. He tried to visualize it. He tried to be ready. But between the 17th and 18th radio transmissions, without a warning, the engine coughed, roared violently for a second and died. There was sudden silence, cut only by the sound of the windmilling propeller and the wind past the cockpit. Brian pushed the nose of the plane down and threw up.